How can you dislike anything Pedro Pascal does?
I mean, true. It's really hard not to.
The following episode contains or may contain spoilers. So if you're spoiler sensitive, maybe beware.
Yeah, you sensitive people.
Get out.
No, get in. All right, welcome to the Phantom Zone, 3 fans, 1 podcast, and a sea of comics. I'm Noah.
I'm Kayla.
And I am Cinemas, the god of film.
But you daylight as
Jared. That's true. They're going to refer to me as Jared as my kind of mortal name.
So we all watched the Wonder Woman 84 movie, and as always, we like to talk about it. And
we have opinions.
Yeah, and I wouldn't necessarily say it's like, this is the definitive review. Any of the reviews we do, it's just us as comic book fans talking about it, because that's what we do.
We didn't.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not, I think it should be clear, we're not film critics.
Yeah.
And I don't say this enough, but thank God, because I would not want to do that as a job.
Yeah. I mean, I was so happy to hear that this was going to come out not only on Christmas, but where I was able to watch it, because Jared and I are in New York and no movie theaters have been open like all year. So
that's right.
Once they were like, oh, it's going to be in theaters, I was like, great. Now I'm
New
going to
York
be
cares
left
about
out.
its people, whereas Texas, where I am, is like, come die.
To be fair, Texas also doesn't care about people in New York. So they just uniformly don't give a shit.
That's very true. I was super excited. I thought I guess let's just touch on the viewing experience, because I think all of us watched it on HBO Max.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, like, of course I miss seeing it in theaters, but as I started watching it, I didn't really, that just kind of like left my head, where I was like, I mean, I watch movies all the time at home.
The only experience I felt like I was missing was music, like the surround sound. And
totally.
That's the only part I felt was I miss like a lot while watching superhero movies in particular. But
true.
Other than that, the size of the screen, I mean, I have a pretty decent TV downstairs, so it's not like I'm like, what do you mean I can't count the pores on Gal Gadot's nose?
So look, I'm going to be a whiny bitch about it and say I really, really missed the theater, but more because I kind of agree with everything you guys said. Like, that's not the part that it's more the psychological aspect of like the build
You're
up.
entering another dimension while passing through those doors. And
there are trailers and shitty food, and it's just the whole ceremony of it. But there were advantages to this, which is like,
not dying.
That's a big one. high on my list. But also just the fact I watched the movie twice.
Right.
Yeah.
Better the second time, I thought.
Okay.
It got better though. I've watched it 3 times only because like,
Christ.
I mean,
I know, it's just my life. I had to squeeze it in last night and be like, guys, please, can we record very early the next day? So.
I mostly because I wanted to watch it again, because of, you watch something the first time and everything's new, and it's
initial impression. The second time is where you really land on
exactly
what you liked and didn't.
Plus, as a representative of the Phantom Zone, I'm too worried about it when I first watch it. And it almost doesn't matter like what the character is. I love Wonder Woman, but even like Ant-Man 2, I was like, man, I hope this doesn't embarrass our profession.
I mean, very few of them do, but there's a number of them that do.
You just feel invested and you love it and you want it to go well.
There's a certain amount of asshole that doesn't like the movie. I go in praying it's the best thing I've ever seen, because I'm just like, don't let them be right about anything.
Yeah.
And we're not going to make it about that, but there was a lot of controversy involved in this. And so I think our mission, and I don't want to speak for all of us, but our mission was sort of like, we hear about Wonder Woman. We want this to go well. Let's just make it about the movie and about the characters that we love. I don't really care about.
Did we enjoy watching it? Why and why not?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
I think everything nowadays, especially comic books have always inherently been political. And it's no surprise that movies can be that way, or, there's controversy surrounding them, because comic movies are the things that make the big bucks now.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to spend this whole time being like Grace Rudolph and just spewing bullshit. It's just, we're gonna talk about the movie, and as comic book fans through a comic book lens, as we like to say, and how did that hold up?
Yeah, because I totally get this whole idea of like, oh, politics, and I'm political, but like, oh, they're like, oh, it was this way, and it was too feministy or not feministy enough, and it's like, I get it, you're lonely, totally, but it's a Wonder Woman movie, so let's stick to that.
And it's going to be feminist.
Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah.
So I mean, to kick it off, how did you guys feel about the tone of the movie?
I'll say this, I didn't like it, but, and this is the big but. That's not the choice. That's a choice they made to go with that tone. And I don't think that's the wrong thing. Like we've talked about this before. I'm a bit more on I kind of like when Diana's more on the warrior side of things.
Yeah.
And so
instead of like the princess of hope and love.
Exactly. And I like this dramatic stakes when this movie has it. So sometimes I think that the Richard Donner thing they were going for cuts against that a bit. But when they do it well. So it's not, I don't have a big criticism.
I actually 1,000% agree with what Jared just said.
Ooh, that's so rare. We need a buzzer or something like that.
We need like a happy sound to play.
Yeah.
I feel like it would have, I understand what they were doing. And when they did it at the climax of the movie, they did it well. Like, I understand what they were going for. I feel like the message was especially powerful at the end of 2020. Going into 2021, we need that hope. So in defense of the cheese, I understand what they were going for. I just felt like this movie could have been a lot stronger if the tone and the choices were a lot darker, or like closer to like, I don't know, like
the first Wonder Woman movie.
Maxwell Lord should have snapped, got it.
Well, when Kayla says that, Kayla says that she wants the hero to kill the bad guy, that's that's a moment.
I think I'm kind of in between, but I think I agree with you guys. Like when it did it well, but I think there was too much of it, and I don't know if that was because it was 2.5 hours long, or because this movie wasn't about It wasn't like the first movie where Wonder Woman was fighting a lot and she was more in the warrior aspect of things. This one was more about her heart and what that means to her and how far she'll go and all of that. So
like the choices she'll make.
Exactly. And I felt like it wasn't far out of what Wonder Woman would be or what her stories can be. So it was just one of those things. I just think that because it was like that Richard Donner-esque way of doing it, it was a little weird. That works for Superman. I don't think it works completely well for Wonder Woman.
Or it does half the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And by the way, because the tone was sort of like threw some people off or whatever, this isn't almost not getting credit for is that it does actually fluidly, in my opinion, handle the tone.
Yeah.
So we begin in this very whimsical place. And then when it gets to darker parts or more serious stuff, it actually does get there. It never feels like this super like abrupt change. So I do think that they deserve some credit because that's not easy.
It's not the choice we would have made, but it's like, okay, they stuck to their choice and they did it well. So
Right. And I think that's the big thing that I personally care about with movies. If they're going to do something, do it. Like, don't just be like tiptoe around it or be like, oh, we're going to do it here, but not really follow through. They did it and they followed through with it. So I have to give them props for that. As far as the general look, so this was set in the 80s. The thing that I really liked is I love Stranger Things, but it wasn't like Stranger Things where every 2 seconds you were like, it's in the 80s. Remember this? There wasn't a lot of 80s music. There was sometimes, but it was like, I get that it's in the 80s, but people in the 80s weren't feeling nostalgic about the 80s. So it was as if you were in that time. You know what I mean? Like,
they're not constantly like, man, the 80s are crazy. The 80s.
Yeah.
I mean, weirdly enough, the only time people used to do that, and I remember this as a kid, like in the 90s more, but similar thing, is that like when they were saying like, there's no point in hoping for things or like we're in the future or like there's no reason to feel like conservative about something. It's like, it's the 90s. I can pop a titty out. It's the 90s or whatever it is. Like,
oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought the fashion looked like the 80s. It was a little more contemporary than it would have been, but I mean, it felt like the 80s. The general look of it, I thought was clean and great. I
felt they could have leaned into it a little more.
Yeah, I had a feeling Kayla would want a little more. The hair wasn't big enough.
I do feel like the fashion was on point. I feel like they could have done more fun things with the colors and the music. I know you guys say you don't want like blasted 80s music all over the place. But I felt like I was really excited for the score, not because I wanted to hear 80s music, but I guess I was kind of disappointed overall with the music.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of the ending fight scene, I guess, when they brought her theme back.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I was kind of like, this was like a mediocre Marvel movie soundtrack and not like cool.
Not like Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah,
where
exactly.
It's really
or
doing
Iron
something. Man,
where they could have done something else aside from generic superhero music, and they didn't, and I'm disappointed because it was in the 80s.
I only disagree a little bit, only because I felt like Hans Zimmer did a good job of mixing the first soundtrack with what he does.
Mm-hmm.
But since it was set in the 80s, you do expect a little more synth.
Yeah.
You do expect a little more of that. But
something.
Yeah, I felt like I listened to the soundtrack by itself, and I love that he added her theme in almost every single song he did. It just sounded a little different. So that was cool. Personally, just listening to it by itself, but you don't get that. And I feel like it was because we didn't see it in a movie theater.
Yeah, maybe.
So we didn't get that, like the whole soundtrack, hearing it as it should.
So I don't disagree about the soundtrack. I didn't notice it, but I kind of defer to both of your points on it. Like, it just didn't affect my viewing consciously, at least.
Yeah.
But one of the things I think they did get right about the 80s was also this like general like attitude of optimism.
Yeah.
And maybe even a certain naive optimism. We'll get to him later in detail, but I think Max Lord, like that kind of character.
Yeah.
And that kind of infomercial and stuff like that, it's so right out of the 80s.
With like 12 TV screens in a window.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But back just to, I have to say, very same with the choice. I want to kind of broaden this question a little bit. Like, what did you guys think about their decision to do it in the 80s? It's very similar to this tone where it's like, I don't like that decision, honestly. I think they handle it well.
Yeah.
But I'm like, what does Wonder Woman have to do with the 80s? Was it just that they needed to put her earlier and so they just picked a decade, you think?
I feel like they wanted to do stuff with the Cold War, Soviet era-esque. Like,
that's a really good point. I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
So, like, I thought that, but it's like, it's such nuanced in the movie, and it's such a small part in the grander scheme of the movie because it's 2.5 hours, and the Soviets and nukes and everything were mentioned at the end. And then you get a little bit of it whenever Max goes to the president.
Well, I feel like that was kind of an overload. So I feel like changing the decade would have maybe made the movie a little cleaner in terms of like the historical context that you're trying to keep in mind. Like, oh shit, this is in the 80s.
I could have used more of that though, honestly, because it does make way more sense for Wonder Woman if it was a little bit more like First Class, where the Cuban Missile Crisis and the arms race were like kind of more there.
I guess if that was the only focus, but this movie was trying to do a lot, so trying to also string in and heavy hand the
you're absolutely
political
right.
context.
But do you guys think that they, in a way, since they did decide to do it in the 80s, I don't know if the choice to do it in the 80s was because there was this, war conflict, or it was more of the aesthetic of it. But do you think that because they decided to do it in the 80s, that they had to acknowledge that happening only because it is a superhero and those are things going on in the world, and it would have been weird to not have a warrior?
Oh yeah, I totally think they were trying to, especially because the scale at the end was global.
Right.
And not just localized. Like, oh no, Manhattan's going to blow up. It was like everyone in the entire world is wishing for things. And guess what? It's in the 80s. Guess what everyone in the different countries are wishing for right now. So I feel like they knew that they would have to address it.
I'm gonna give you a counter theory here. Not exactly counter, but like, I think that, I know this sounds weird, I think they just wanted to do the 80s. I don't know if it was Patty Jenkins or I should research a little bit more before I make a strong claim. But to me, it's just like, I think from a story perspective, if they wanted to do the Cold War or something like that, or the idea of, from our character standpoint about like being between peace and war, the 50s actually make way more sense.
Pretty much closer to the first movie.
Which still would have been, that was World War I. So you're still talking about like a huge chunk of time. The reason I say this is the 80s, like the optimism of having Superman in that decade makes so much more sense. Right. In the 80s, we didn't think we were going to lose to the Russians.
Right.
We, when I say we, I mean Americans. Like, so it's like there wasn't the same like tension. We were constantly afraid the bomb was going to drop in a way that, but anyway, I don't want to.
In this one, they just let them all go.
Yeah. Yeah.
All the bombs are going to drop. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting. I also feel like a part of it was they wanted to separate themselves from current like Justice League timeline.
Mm-hmm.
That way they had the ability to really do whatever they wanted.
How much is it like also Shazam and Aquaman just had a lot of color and they did well and they're like, let's bring some color into Wonder Woman too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, her
Again,
costume.
They could have leaned into it a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, so how did you guys feel about the design of it all? Like,
I liked
so
it.
the costumes, you know, the direction of it.
Cheetah could have looked a whole lot worse. I was like holding my breath the entire movie until like the reveal of how she would look as Cheetah, and I was like, okay, I can live with this.
Yeah.
I wasn't blown away, but I was like, this isn't Cats, thank God.
Okay, I think they really messed this part up, but in a way that I did not predict, because I agree with you. She looked great. She looked great, and the motion looked great.
Yeah.
Here's what I am baffled by. They put her in this washed out gray background.
The final fight should not have been in the dark.
And I do not understand.
She has a golden armor. It would have looked beautiful in the daylight.
And Cheetah is a really, like, she doesn't need to be this neon orange, but like, she's a very striking character, and their choice to sort of wash her out is, to me, I mean, like, I actually think it's just a real big, I don't want to be like amateur mistake, because this might be something as simple as like, we committed to this and now this cost us $10 million to do it this way and we can't back out now. That is a pressure I understand, but I don't think it looked, that portion didn't look great for me.
Yeah. I mean, I liked her updated suit. I thought, you know, her costume, Wonder Woman's costume, it was much brighter. It was more along the lines of what it looks like in the comics. Like, it's red and blue and gold, depending on who's drawing it.
Yeah.
I respect the shit out of what they're doing here, and I think people forget with movies of this scale, there's so much confluence and studio money and all this kind of stuff they're like having to choose stuff against. So in the story, that's that part I'm talking about. You know, everything is kind of gone to shit. And so the 80s brightness that we begin with has just been all destroyed, and it's going. And that's kind of how the 80s ended up. So it's relatively accurate. So they end up with this drab place that the fight ends up. And I think that put them in position where Cheetah ends up being washed out. So it's not like it was just like this completely random decision. I think these kind of creative choices get like bump up against each other all the time in movies like this.
I love that basically we're like, yeah, they did it well, but, you know, I would have chosen differently. That's like our opinion on everything so far.
That's a good point. It's like the beginning of it's very bright and almost whimsical in a way. And as we get further into the climax or what the story's about, it does get darker and it gets more heavy. And the tone goes that way too. But it's one of those things where like, okay, that sounds good on paper, but her lasso looked great in the dark, but I can't see Cheetah that well, and I can't see Wonder Woman that well, and now you threw them underwater, so what is happening at this point? Like, all right, so before we get into the characters and really how they did these characters, the last like technical element that we'll talk about is, you know, overall story and writing. So how did you guys feel about Geoff Johns' work on this?
I hated it. This is my theory, because the film has gotten a certain amount of actual criticism, not just the political shit. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's getting overall good reviews, but like it has gotten like, oh, this is a problem. And I honestly believe almost everything comes down to the script. Yeah. When it's bad, I think it's a matter of writing. And the funny thing is, like, I found out Geoff Johns has kind of a bad history of working with others.
Yeah. He's worked on a few projects prior, and especially a lot of the CW stuff. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of backlash and a lot of, you know, butting heads creatively. And I don't know. I feel like maybe in this one he had more of his hands in it, because I'm seeing a lot of stuff that I didn't like from prior stuff he did seeping into this one.
Apparently, Joss Whedon sort of attributes a lot of Geoff Johns as being some of why that movie turned out bad, because, you know, in some sense they sent Geoff Johns in there, and maybe it's not even he's a dick or something, but like for some reason when he writes with other people, it just like it doesn't turn out well. I didn't know Kevin Feige, whatever.
I know who you're talking about.
Apparently, Geoff Johns was consulting on some Marvel projects too, and he got fired.
Yeah.
So
he's a great writer when he writes his comics.
Definitely.
There's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. But I feel like this is one of those cases where it's like, if you're working with a huge creative team, especially on a movie, you got to work well with them. and you got to understand that the medium is different. I'm not saying he doesn't know that, but there's just some through line where it's like your comics are great, but your movies and TV shows seem to not be working well. And I don't know if that's because there's some disconnect or fighting creatively or whatever.
But yeah, I mean, like, the dialogue is fine for me for the most part, but like this has a lot of plot holes. And when it doesn't have plot holes, it has like weird decisions.
Okay, so I'm curious about that because I've seen a lot of people talk about plot holes. And when I see them actually list the plot holes, it's just stuff that you have to get over because it's a comic book movie. And it's like, no, they don't need to explain like exactly where the nukes went after everybody, rescinded their wish.
That's a good point because like there is like, it's a sliding scale. And I mean, there's certain plot holes that are logical inconsistencies. This doesn't have that so much. What I think a more pernicious form that you see more, it's more subtle, is why I'm having to ask the question in my head, and it's distracting.
What question? I'm very curious too.
Oh, no. So a good example, this is really weird, but it did come out. So Cheetah gets killed by electricity, but Cheetah's sort of initial wish was to be as powerful as Wonder Woman, and then to be at like more, let's say, and then she gets knocked out by electricity. It's relatively vague. Again, one of those things where it's like, just from a physical standpoint, it's like, why isn't electricity... Why isn't Wonder Woman, who's also on water, being affected by it? And then why does it specifically hurt her?
I think it's more because she's the daughter of Zeus and she doesn't really get hurt by lightning.
This is a writing issue, which is like and this happens all through the movie where they really just could have included a few sentences that would have been like, because a good example, Max's powers. Over a period of time, you figure out that, when he gives you something, he gets to choose it. But rather than just sort of say that, which they do later, you have to figure it out through context. And the first couple of examples don't make it exactly clear. And again, it's one of those, I watched this again and I was like, after knowing that, I instantly got it. But the first time through, and it's another example was like, is that a plot hole? Not exactly, but it's an issue of a lack of clarity and the physics of that. The other thing, you remember when Wonder Woman is like fighting in the chase scene, the big action pack second part?
Yes.
Can you be more specific?
Oh, the chase scene, tanks, and she's
when they're in Egypt.
Oh, yeah,
yeah. It's sort of the big, yeah, exactly.
Right.
We don't really know she's lost her powers yet.
Well, she doesn't know that though. But like she doesn't know that until she realizes
gets shot.
Yeah,
right.
That's
She's
true.
like, what the fuck is that?
That was as soon as I saw that, and they did a good job of editing all the blood and bruises off of her for the thing.
They made her look ugly, and I love it.
Yeah,
as ugly
they really
as they
did.
can make Gal Gadot look,
Here's the thing. The point is, like, we're Wonder Woman fans, right? So we actually know, and actually think the audience has this power too. There's an ambiguity about whether she's bulletproof at all. That's just in comics.
Yeah, when I saw that, I was like, so they're doing, like, she's vulnerable to man-made weapons.
But then it looks like when she was surprised, you're like, oh, okay, that's not supposed to happen. But see, like,
exactly.
I feel like it's not, like, things don't have to be spoon-fed to you the whole time.
That's
I feel
true.
like discovering Max's powers, like, through context as he uses them more and more makes sense to me.
He probably doesn't know that that's happening either. He's figuring it out as he goes.
I'm just like, you don't have to know everything as soon as it happens, because that's how you get exposition dumps.
You're absolutely right. But I think there's a way to give information. Like, so in other words, you got these two bad poles. You have exposition that's like clunky and dialogue, but then you also have like vagary. And so that, I guess where we disagree a bit is that, like, I don't think this was like a command of ambiguity or a slow revealing. I think it was actually just kind of like vague. And it happens like a few times where I was like
the writing in the movie would have bothered me more if they didn't go for the cheesy, lighter tone towards the end.
Totally.
If they would have gone like I wanted, really, the darker way, I feel like the writing would have really stood out as something that I had a problem with. Because then
it would have been like Titans.
Yeah, but if you're going for kind of like the cliche, almost like happy, cheesy, truth is justice stuff, I feel like I can forgive a certain amount of like cliche, cheesy writing, because I'm just like, okay.
I want to do a few more examples here, but only just to make the point that it's like, I don't think it's just cherry picking. It's like, and
I don't know. You're gonna have to fight for it, because I'm still thinking you're cherry picking. nitpicking.
But here's the thing. I mean, to be honest, if you like away from this film's history, you know my history. To be honest, I don't really do this much. Like I'm not like, oh, the logical inconsistency are insane. Another example.
Superhero movies.
Exactly. Like it's just not usually my thing. It is more of like, I'm so not trying to be that way that this kind of stood out a lot. Another example is like, Max, like she's like, we all have to recant our wish. She's got to recant her wish, everything like that. So we're hoping that the entire nation, like to a person, recants their wish, or does it have to be 60%? And from a writing standpoint, way easier to just say they have to get Max to recant his wish because he's the source of it.
Undo everything.
Yeah, but I think the whole premise of it is that she, the truth and the God that this stone is apparently from is about lies and deceit. And the whole point is that she is hoping and she's instilling that hope into everybody because she connected to the same thing Max was. So
I feel like, the cheesy, powerful message is that everyone revokes their wish.
I'm like, okay to like not even really give that a second thought. It's like, yeah, it happens in comics all the time where everybody is like, we stand for truth and justice. It's like everybody does, like everybody. But it's one of those things like, okay, as long as they like recant their wish of the nukes going away, then I don't really care about that Irish guy that told that girl to drop dead.
I care.
You know what I mean? No, but that's what I'm saying. It's like, but what I'm saying is like, I don't think they needed to really, you have to suspend that disbelief where it's like, yes, everybody did.
That's true. But I'll put it this way. I think a lot of comic book movies, this doesn't happen. So, because in other words, like I just sat with this after the second watch. These questions kind of came to me, well, and in some sense, I think the writer, it's their responsibility you're trying to suspend disbelief, and they don't get in the way of that. And I felt like it's a lot of speed bumps. There was other stuff too that I thought was like sloppy. I don't like the wishing stone. I think that's cheap. I know it's meant to be efficient, but there was a lot of plot holes here. And then that thing ends up just being a way to like, and then the other thing, we got to stop after, because I just have a number of these.
We will be moving on.
So there was somebody that it was like in some group on Facebook, and they had said the same thing. And I was like, I'm curious, what are the plot holes that you're talking about? The plot holes that, I'm not saying this is you, but the plot holes that a lot of people are talking about are things that it's like, is that a plot hole, or did you just want them to explain it? And I feel like most of the stuff that we see in comic book movies, we're not getting an explanation of it. It's like, her powers are this, so that's what she can do. Or this happened, and they said that everybody recanted their wish. It's what it did.
It just comes down to certain things bother certain people.
Right.
So it did bother you. That's legitimate. So.
Well, and the subtle difference is that like a contradiction can be explained, but so in other words, all plot holes can be explained. So I agree with you. But anyway, in other words, like I think the difference is some things aren't explained, but you don't need it because it's not a contradiction. If that makes any sense.
Before we get off of the story and the writing, one of the bigger things that I had an issue with, and I didn't really realize it until watching it again, was, and I know some people have said this, and I was like, what? No. And then I thought about it. It was really weird. Is she sleeps with Steve Trevor, but is in another guy's body?
Yeah.
And that's not cool. Because no matter how you try to spin it, it's like she's seeing Steve Trevor. Nobody else sees Steve Trevor. And that's still that guy's body. And she sees him at the end. Like, did she?
Again,
weird.
From the writing standpoint, why doesn't he just magically appear?
Yeah. Why did he have to pop into some other person's body?
Because all of the wishes, you didn't get exactly what you wanted.
Consequence.
So.
Well, she lost her powers. That was sufficient to be like, you get something, you lose something. This is my point about like where there was a more elegant sort of like immediate solution. And I get that they were going for this other thing.
Do you think though that she was losing her powers because she was giving herself into that God's lies and deceit, and she's literally the opposite of that? So I don't know if it was necessarily by proxy with her wish, but more she was giving into that God's powers per se. It was kind of like,
I never thought of it that way.
It's like the opposite of Cheetah. It's like Cheetah technically got two wishes, but the more she was giving herself over to that, the more her humanity was going away.
Well, to their criticism, it's like, why even get us to this place where we're having to explain this? Like, is that a rape?
Yeah.
It was unnecessary for the story they needed to tell. And I think that this happens a lot in this movie where I think they have a moment they want to get to.
Mm-hmm.
But the aftermath is just kind of meh.
Exactly. So I think they were trying to get to the moment where she sees this guy and it's like a reminder that she's ready to move on. And it happens to be the body that Steve Trevor went in. So him going into that body is in some sense like fatalistic of like, I was in the person that you're going to see that's going to remind you you're ready to see other dudes. Okay, I get they wanted to do that, but
they just didn't need to have them sleep together.
Exactly.
They could have avoided this whole weird thing if like they just didn't show that they slept together. You know, like that was just weird to me. So we'll get off of the technical and writing stuff because I'm sure we're going to talk about it more. And let's talk about these characters how we felt they were in the movie. So let's start with the big one. Wonder Woman, Gal Gadot. And I mean,
I feel like she really improved on the acting front. Like when she contorted her face, and when she was sad, I was sad.
I teared up.
Yeah, me
I watched
too.
it 3 times and I teared up 2 times.
Yeah.
And it's just, she did do a good job.
Wait, was it because of sadness or was it because she's fucking perfect?
Both.
She's both, yeah. Every time anyone would be like, oh my God. Normally I find that so annoying when people in the crowd, like this woman that's dressed nicely walks through and everyone's like double taking. And normally I just find that obnoxious. But in this, I'm like, no, yeah, she's a goddess. Yeah, like, oh my God, I would that.
Too.
Yeah, like, oh my goodness.
It occurred to me while watching this, and I said this in a tweet, that like Wonder Woman is basically this podcast's Beyonce.
Oh my God, Wonder Woman!
She's flawless. And you're just in love with that. But so in terms of the character, though, I have to say, like, I thought this was a genius part of the writing. I'm not just gonna shit on all of it because I think that they were like, okay, Wonder Woman's great, and we can't just pretend she's got flaws, but how is she not boring? So they kind of twist that into this thing, which is like she loves him so much that she's willing to like fuck up the world for it or whatever. That's very believable to me. I mean, in terms of, it's like, how do you create this internal dilemma with this without sacrificing, not making her shitty? Yeah, which is what they like to do.
Yeah.
Especially with the character that always seems like she has her shit together. Mm-hmm. Like they really like shook the foundation of this character and how far she'll go. Because immediately when she saw Steve, she stopped looking for Max.
She did. They just left.
Yeah. So it was like, oh, I see what's happening here. And I was like, oh no.
Diana comes to save man's world. There's always been this messianic quality to her. Do you guys remember? Have you ever seen that movie Dogma? It's a Kevin Smith movie.
Mm-mm.
Yes.
There's a part where Alan Rickman, who plays Metatron, the angel, he says, like, do you know what it was like when I had to go to this? And I'm not Christian, so but I love the story. When he's like, do you know what it was like to go to this 13-year-old boy and tell him that he's the son of God and he's got to die for sins and everything like that? Like the psychology of a person who has to like why does this have to happen to me? Can't I just have a happy life? Yeah. There's something about Diana's psychology that you tap into here where she's just had to be completely selfless for the world.
Yeah, we love her and we want her to get what she wants. And she wants this one thing. So it really does work on a psychological level because we want it for her and it's believable that she wants that too. And she deserves it.
And the fact that she's like, this is the one thing that I want. Yeah. Why can't I have this one thing? And it's like,
I know.
Give it to her.
and the thing that I do like about this movie and in a writing standpoint, I guess, is thematically, that's what the movie's about. So they have locked the character's central dilemma with the story that keeps getting repeated. That is actually a relatively strong part of the writing. It deserves credit, I think.
Yeah, I feel like superhero movies in general don't do that very well in terms of like an overall theme and, and executing that. This did it really good.
I mean, I personally love those stories in the superhero movies that do try to do it, where you're really focusing in on the character and they have this decision to make. And like, that's the driving force for the entire story because, we can see them in tights and punching things all the time, but we got to know the character. We have to connect with the character. And I'm sure all of us can relate into like, I just want this one thing. Why can't I have this one thing? Why does this suck?
to sort of Kayla's, like, this isn't a point you just made, but I think it's something resonates the way that you look at this stuff. It's like, and again, I don't want to speak for you, but I just listen. So it's like,
I appreciate you listening.
Well, I think Kayla gets very annoyed when you have to like build in flaws or you have to make a person bad to make them interesting.
Yeah.
And one way to make a good, benevolent character who's noble interesting, I think, is, as Noah sort of points out, to give them this sort of dilemma, a decision. So they have an internal crisis, but it's not necessarily about like, should I kill or should I molest? You know what I mean? It's like, It's actually about like two good things that they're fighting with.
One of the top keys for writing is like, you take a character and what do they want most and how do you stop them from getting it? And that's just what this movie was.
Real smart. Yeah. And it's a good way, just to say, it's a good way to not put at odds character and plot, which is, I think, a problem a lot of times I have. I have a story-driven movie, and so I have to make the character boring to fit that plot. This collapsed those two really nicely, I think.
Only
because I feel like it deals with Wonder Woman. How'd you guys feel about Chris Pine, Steve Trevor?
I love him. I had to lose him twice. And so did Diana.
Oh my God, that's so true. And it feeds off that first point. So this is a good segue because the idea is like when she's like, I just want one thing, Chris Pine. We're like, I get it.
Me too.
I get it.
Their chemistry was so amazing.
Literally, when he was like, you don't have to say goodbye, I'm already gone. I was like, oh, why? Why do you have to be that way?
And it's an not annoying thing, but I don't want to be like overly explicit about the sort of feminist sort of position here. But I think what's really good is that he manages to be a very supportive character that doesn't like have to upstage Wonder Woman. People make too much hay about the fact that like she's motivated by her love for him. But see, that's the point. It's her love. It's not his life.
Yeah.
You know, and I think they handle that really well. And like, he's good, and he's also not a kiss ass or overly suck uppy. He's very believable. Yeah, I think it's really good. He's a success.
Like when he finds action that he can take or steps that he can take to help her, he'll take those steps. So otherwise, he's just holding up the camera like, you're doing amazing, sweetie.
Yeah. Keep it up. I'm so proud.
That's my girlfriend.
And I think the really insecure misogynistic types of dudes have this issue, which they think that the idea is like, oh, you're elevating women at the cost of diminishing a guy. You take Wonder Woman out of this equation, and he's still a badass.
Yeah.
Also,
so it's just a false dilemma.
Has been a feminist icon for like 75 plus years.
I completely agree.
That conversation that they have in the jet when they take off, when he's like, well, shit, Diana. When they're like, you're gonna start shooting at us. And she finally makes it invisible. By the way, that was my favorite way to do the invisible jet. I mean, that's awesome. But that conversation when she was like, there's stuff that you can do that I can't. And I've always been jealous of your ability to fly. I have problems with the way it was done in the movie in terms of her ability to fly. I just think it looked really bad in terms of like CGI. That conversation I felt like was important to the point that you're making, which is it wasn't that they were like, Diana's so much better. It was like, Diana's a goddess. Like, he's a normal, awesome dude. There are things that he can do that she can't. And that's how all relationships should be. And
yeah, you play to your partner's strength.
Yeah. It should be a goddess and a regular dude.
Like, exactly.
Like, I know this is cheap to mention this too, just because I said it on Twitter already, but like this, like just because Noah mentioned like she's been a feminist icon for 75 years. Yeah. That's what killed me. The people that have a problem, I mean, you haven't heard that much, but the people that said like, oh, it's too feministy a movie. It's like, it's a character who was raised on a paradise of just women, who's they're a bunch of warrior badasses, and she comes to man's world to save them from themselves. This was written in the 30s. Yeah, I think she's kind of in the feminist orientation.
Just a little bit, you know,
her
just a little tiny bit.
Her hero name isn't Lasso Girl. It's literally Wonder Woman. Like,
and you don't need to like know the comics is the thing. Yeah. That it's just so baked into the concept of this whole idea that like it's forced. It's like this is just as feminist as it has to be. There's just
also,
no way around that.
Just watch Linda Carter's Wonder Woman.
I did recently.
Her cameo at the end, I was like getting so emotional. It was perfect.
It was a perfect cameo.
It was.
I did want to mention one of the things I didn't like about Diana in this movie or Wonder Woman was I could live with not having the sword and shield, but I felt like the lasso did a little too much.
Agreed.
Like it was like a Swiss Army knife.
Yeah.
And it was like, yes, this lasso can do things like, bridge the gap between languages, expel demons and stuff like that. But like the fact that it it split into two and did all these things and she's using it to swing from one thing to another. I was just like, I feel like you're leaning into it too much.
Jared's point on why people often forget Wonder Woman can fly in the deep dive. And it was because she's technically, at her best, a brawler character. She's supposed to be, like, in the nitty-gritty, actually fighting you. Like, she will headbutt you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the lasso and the flying kind of just added to the, like, it lost the brawler aspect of her character, which the sword and shield really enhances that part. And the lasso and the flying detracts from that.
Maybe because she wasn't killing terrible people on the other side of the war and she didn't really need her sword and shield. She was just trying to stop hostage situations. But
I just love when Steve points the gun and he's just like, God damn it, I can't shoot him.
Yeah.
There's a middle ground there too, because I actually think you can get rid of the sword and shield almost entirely, because she didn't have them for most of the comic books. And it does make sense, because if you can't kill people, having a sword, just like, as a matter of fact, comic book characters who have swords, who can't, but they still won't kill, end up doing the dumbest shit. The Black Knight in the Avengers was like always hitting people with the broad, flat end of the blade. They say that so many times. It's like, you should get a baseball bat, dude. It's like way,
Well, I think that's the thing that, like, I was just missing that, like, punching and really cool moves that she did because it was so lasso heavy, even though it looked amazing.
She would like float on the ground. So if you want her to be graceful, you can do it that way. Like the way she kneels and like slides. I love that movie. She did it a couple of times in this movie and I missed it when she would.
Yeah, I was really hoping that she would, like the last fight with Cheetah, I was hoping we would get those things we were missing for most of the movie, and it was still lasso heavy, and I was like, I get it, like the lasso is amazing, I love the lasso, but like stop swinging around and punch her, for God's sake.
I think they got too into the lasso effects, because I think your point is well taken, that like, it's I think you were dead on, and it's a very interesting undersaid point, which is that like it's versatile in all these things it can do. Like you said, it can exorcise demons, it can like, man, that's all cool. She doesn't use it like it's a tentacle in the comics. Like physically, it's usually, I mean, she uses it literally like tying
she uses it
and,
to bridge the gap between range.
Yeah.
That's usually what she does, or she needs to confine, hold somebody. It was just a weird thing that I noticed, like watching again. I was like, there's something.
But how did you like Steve Trevor? Because we moved on, and I want to know how you feel, and I feel like that was on purpose.
You liked Chris Pine, you said.
Part of me, I like what they've done with him in the movies. I don't like him in the comics. That's like a completely different thing.
Hey, I thought I convinced you after the deep dive.
You did. I had a more appreciative, because I'm like, oh, they are always like friends at the least. So I was like, I do like that. I like that she has somebody. I liked it. I thought, if they were going to put stakes for her personally, if it wasn't going to involve her mother or the Amazons, it had to involve Steve at this point in time. And I thought that they did it. It made me super emotional. It made me feel for her. And it was all because of Steve.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I appreciate that the road they've taken and like creating these emotional stakes. But I will say that they have like basically they can't keep bringing him back. So
this was the last time probably, which is why I was so emotional. I lost Steve Trevor twice, and he can't come back.
I wouldn't hold your breath. I feel like only going off of the comics too, Steve Trevor always fucking comes back, and I think that's one of the things that I always get a little annoyed with him. Because I'm not like, annoyed. You're just a human. Stop coming back.
Bring back Chris Pine.
but DC, I mean, so the problem is like with movie continuity, the realism aspect, people aren't as comfortable with that kind of stuff. Like in comics, we're just so used to reboots and like, oh, you're a clone of a extra dimensional alien.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Well, I mean, if Rise of Skywalker can bring back Palpatine, they can bring back Chris Pine in the next Wonder Woman movie. That's my argument.
Do not start me on.
I also feel like Wonder Woman could kick Palpatine's ass.
Oh,
yeah, for sure.
His electricity won't even touch her. I know, right?
Bitch, you thought.
Yeah. All right, so Kristen Wiig as Cheetah, the one character I have the most problems with in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I love Kristen Wiig. I thought the script she was given and the direction she needed to do, she nailed it.
Yep.
I did not need another Michelle Pfeiffer Catwoman situation because that's not Cheetah, and they had the opportunity to go a different route. And I felt like they just got this person that nobody liked, and she needed to get superpowers for her to, feel good about herself. It was literally the Michelle Pfeiffer Catwoman story. That's literally what that story was. And it was like,
I liked her, actually. The only problem I had was that they nerfed her at the end so she couldn't remain Cheetah and come back. I really don't like that she had to recant her wish, or that was the implication. Because in general, it bothers me when superhero movies, Marvel Cinematic Universe should have broken this barrier down. But I don't like when they tie everything up. They kill all of the bad guys at the end of the movie, or they're no longer bad. And then you can't take those characters forward into the next movie. So I liked Cheetah's character growth, but the fact that they then ended it with her recanting means that that whole plot was pointless.
I think it's an easy fix, actually, in that case, because I think you just say, oh, residual power. And I think you can keep Max that way too, because I've thought about that too. I hate they only get to be in one movie thing, and I think basically they had the most exposure to the stone. There's ways to write it in where they still maintain some of that.
She also got 2 wishes, so we don't necessarily know.
Negated Max's enhancement of her previous wish, so that would be cool. I don't think Max is going to come back because I feel like he actually had a change of heart. I don't think her change of heart was written in. And
they also don't need to bring Max back. I don't think that. I think he's good as a one-off, but for if they were that's Cheetah's one and only movie, that's really dumb. And also it's taking Lex and Joker, only having him in one movie, and that's it. It just doesn't, that's her villain.
Yeah.
They can't do that. I feel like.
No, you're right. And it's disappointing. And I think the bigger issue is it's a missed opportunity that's very conspicuous as opposed to it being just on its face bad. I think you're dead on about the Michelle Pfeiffer Catwoman thing, especially because it's also the Halle Berry Catwoman story. Yeah. Is that even though they changed, it was Patience Interpretude or whatever her name was. So I think it's Patience Phillips or whatever.
It was something stupid.
But anyway, it was the same thing. They did the same story, which was that she was this meek person, and then she gets farted on, mouth farted by cats. It's a really weird movie if you haven't seen it. And neither of those are actually Catwoman.
Right.
Catwoman is a badass from the start. But either way,
I had hopes. I think I was just missing that. Because we've talked about Cheetah quite a bit. We recently did in the Wonder Woman deep dive, and I spotlighted her in our second episode, I believe.
Yeah.
The thing that she is in my top 5 of favorite villains of all time because of the connection that Diana and Barbara have.
That's right.
And the thing I was missing was that thing that really, so they brought them together great in the film. I was I can see them being really good friends. I love their relationship. I thought Kristen Wiig was very charming.
Yeah.
That's how Barbara Minerva comes off. But the thing that made them butt heads was she just got a wish, and her residual effect of the wish was taking away her humanity and kindness. That's fine, but it's no different from Michelle Pfeiffer or Halle Berry. Or I was it's just missing that extra level of
personal connection.
Yeah, exactly. That story with Barbara after Wonder Woman meets Barbara again after she becomes Cheetah, and Barbara explains to her, you did this to me. You were supposed to help me and you didn't. It was I was just missing that, and I felt this was the one opportunity that we could get that.
There's a second big problem, which happens with villains a lot. Sometimes it happens with heroes for an origin story, but the other thing is the character that we love and care about and fell in love with in the comic and we want to see in the movie ends up just being the final form that exists only in the last 12 minutes at the most. Happens all the time. They could have foregone that, I think, by instead of having this whole middle ground where she's just strong like Wonder Woman, make her Cheetah early, the first wish, but make it a werecat thing, because that's how the comics work too, where she's turning into the Cheetah at first, and and
then the last wish is that's her final form, she's stuck there.
Or the more she does it, the more she wants to stay in that form. Exactly.
That's
then you
cool.
get Cheetah early on, and we don't just have to have this one moment.
I thought about that too, because I was I actually liked the scenes where she was discovering her powers and, when she beat the shit out of that guy. I was I love this because you get to feel more for Barbara and you get to be I see why you're doing this.
Yeah.
Like, I see why you want to be like Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
And I had a feeling, I was like, does Barbara like Diana? I was like, I think she likes her.
Yeah, I feel like it too.
I'm in love all the time.
Yeah,
exactly.
I fall in love constantly.
Yeah, it's so cool. I loved her as like, for what it was.
For
I just
Barbara
hoped
Minerva.
for more.
Yeah, I can understand because she does one of your favorite villains. I liked what they did with her because I feel like, not to go all woman on you, but I feel like she wasn't just like a loser person. It was like she was a victimized woman.
Yeah.
Right.
In society, and I feel like they purposely put her on the opposite sides of Wonder Woman, not only with the wish, but with the main theme is you should be a Wonder Woman and not a Cheetah. You could feel sorry for Cheetah. She was just as good of a person at the beginning, but she took shortcuts. She cheated, and that's what happened. So I feel like, again, her character arc went along with or against technically the main theme of the movie. So I feel like maybe if it would have been a different character, maybe you would have liked it. But because it was Cheetah, the Cheetah you wanted to see, I just feel like it was executed rather well.
Yeah, I don't want it to seem like I didn't like her because she actually was probably one of my favorite parts of the movie.
Yes.
Within the first 20 minutes of the movie, when I got to meet Barbara and when I saw that Maxwell Lord had his son, I was like, oh shit, like I care about everyone in this movie. And they're the bad guys.
Yeah. Closest to the moment that I guess I was hoping for that we got was when she was telling Barbara, like, your humanity's going, your kindness is gone. Like, this is not who you are. I was like, oh. Yeah, I was like, okay, those were the moments that I was hoping for. Sadly, we got like all of it in the last 10 minutes. I felt like the pacing was weird with that, but
it was. The White House scene had some of that too.
Right.
Yeah. Which I really thought was underappreciated.
I like that scene a lot, but I feel like that was probably where I got the personal why she would, after this movie, continue to dislike or like have a personal vendetta against Diana was in the scene with the White House. It was like, you're standing in the way of what I want to be. Like, I'm not going to give up being this better person. I was shit on my entire life. You're Wonder Woman. Why don't you understand? And you're trying to actively take that away from me. So I feel like that White House scene when Barbara finally takes a stand against Wonder Woman, I was like, I can see why this would carry on past this movie in terms of like the antagonism between them, like the personal fighting between them.
You both make very good points. You usually don't. You usually both are not
Jared's like, I normally agree with one of you, but you know.
Well, I mean, I think in some sense it is not the best Cheetah representation from the comics, and it feels like somewhat of a missed opportunity. So I very much agree with that. But I think you make a really strong case that like the writing aspect, that just what they made and how they fit it all together, it's a stronger part of this thing. I want to add one extra thing, which is why I think it's a bit disappointing. It's a bit disappointing from a Christian Wig place, and the reason I say that, Kristen Wiig, which is that, so they just begin with her being Kristen Wiig. And doing a very like a role we've seen her do a lot, and she does become something that we haven't seen, which is really fun as the antagonist. But I think that I think what I anticipated was that she was going to either begin a little bit more feisty, and I saw the previews that so it didn't matter, it changed my other, or that they were going to do a thing that was her a little bit more competent, because that's the thing in the comics. She's one of two things in the major interpretation. She was either kind of a villainous beginning as like kind of a hard ass, or she was like Diana's friend, but she was like smart as shit and like really like confident and up on it. And
Diana went to her for answers. And it felt like that weird thing where it was like, no, Diana has all the answers. And it's like, okay, so why is Barbara here?
Well, then it used her a lot for her knowledge. When she was listing all of her various degrees, and a part-time cryptozoologist.
Yeah. I loved it. I mean, it's a good point, Jared. Like, she did start out as Kristen Wiig. And she had to. Like, that's what people love her as.
That's right.
But she showed a completely different range. Like, if you haven't seen any of the other serious movies she's in, she showed a range and she became an apex predator really well.
I feel like the acting in this movie on all parts is really good.
So I can't believe none of us have said that up until now. I honestly think that the reason I like this movie overall, and we'll talk about it more, but is just that like the acting beat the writing for me.
Yeah.
I mean, they sold it. Everybody sold it. And speaking of selling black gold,
that's a good segue.
Yeah.
Pedro Pascal, you can't.
Pascal.
I'm just waiting for him to have a role where he's not a single dad, but he plays it well. He needs to play to his strengths.
It is so good. Let me tell you how good this is, right? Because I have said that I think that one of the things I don't like about this, also a writing thing, but it's very Max Lord, is that like I think it's a very thinly veiled Trump impression. And not an impression, but like reference. Look, I'm not going to harp on this because I
didn't get that because I don't have any sympathy for Trump and all of the sympathy
I agree.
for Max Lord.
No, I'm so glad you put it that way because like, I mean, like the reason I was like, when I was like in the second watch, when I was like, they've really hammed it up is when he like takes the president's power.
Oh, yeah.
And he's literally on the presidential podium and it's all about lies and false promises. And also Pedro Pascal has dark hair. Max Lord has dark hair, but they gave him blonde hair. I wonder why. Anyway, and he's in orange light at one point, and I was like, "God damn!" Okay, anyway, no, but here's the point. This is my point, which is that like, it's not a Trump impression because Pedro Pascal actually made a more three-dimensional character than Trump is in real life.
That's true. Mm-hmm. I felt bad for this oil shark salesman guy.
Stag.
What I'm saying is that it's more like I think it is a Trump, but I didn't care because he's so good at it. Max is such a compelling character; he just works.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of people say that, and there are definitely political issues in this outside of this possibly being a Trump, calling or whatever.
That's why she didn't snap his neck at the end.
I wish. She should have. She should have went total like Kathy Griffin and just like decapitated. Anyway,
yeah. Dude, weirdly enough, the snapping the neck is more. For whatever reason, to me, it disturbed me more.
Well, because his whole head turns around.
Yeah, it's like Exorcist, but not.
I just didn't get that only because Maxwell Lord's character, he's an egomaniac. Mm-hmm. He is. Trump and Maxwell Lord share the same qualities. Mm-hmm. So if you throw any narcissist into a movie, you could be like, that's Trump. It's like, well, it is only because Trump is a narcissist and he's an egomaniac.
No, it's all the extra shit. I agree with that part. There's a part where he's like, I'm a television personality.
Well, because he was.
I know, but that's the other thing is that like Max Lord isn't those things. So all these extra similarities that they wrote in for the movie, they're not from the comic. And they're also not necessary for Max. Like he did.
I mean, yeah, I think it's one of those things where you could pull from it however you see it.
Sure,
Kayla, I didn't see that when people were like, he's like Trump. I'm like, is he? I didn't get that.
I didn't until after the first viewing, before the second. I was like,
I was just too distracted by Pedro Pascal's acting and general
so
awesomeness.
Good. No mustache threw me off for a second.
If you put this guy down on paper, I would hate him. I don't want to care about a person like this. And yet, every scene, even when he was being like the epitome of asshole dickishness, I was like, I kind of want you to get what you want.
The beginning.
Yeah.
I was a tiny itty bit annoyed about his powers that he had. I don't think that they needed to give him something to make him have powers. You could just make him have powers like everybody else.
I kind of like the balancing aspect of it, though. That like he's losing health, and then he has to grant someone's wish in order to take something back. I like that balance. I like it. Felt like sorcery instead of just like all out magic. It was like there's a negative consequence to this.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like it until you saw that he was having consequences and there was stakes for him.
Yeah,
and that's why I was like, oh, okay, yeah. Like I do kind of like this, especially if they're going to do it as a one-off. Like whatever. And I felt like there was they pulled a lot of Maxwell stories in there. So like the one where Wonder Woman does kill him. He used television. So instead of getting OMAC or Brother Eye, he used the government, experimental satellites and stuff to do that.
That's why at the end, I was like so convinced she was going to snap his neck. And I'm like, no, he has a son.
Yeah, and the thing, we love that moment where Wonder Woman snaps his neck. I mean, we love it because it's so signature or whatever. It's in the comic books heavily frowned upon in the story, and there's some like Batman is actually calling Wonder Woman into question in that moment, and I think he kind of speaks for the narration in a sense where it's sort of like she's not supposed to do shit like that.
Yeah.
I wish. As far as like stakes wise and stuff, and I feel like the big emotional climax of the movie wasn't necessarily Barbara because they kind of teetered on it quite a bit.
No, yeah, it was Max and the wishes. They kind of put it
Right.
in, like the emotional climax was everyone. That's why when you were talking about everyone had to recant their wish, that's where the energy went.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I was hoping that they would have kept Steve in there a little more until that moment. Because I feel like
we actually
having
had
to
to
do
watch
that,
him disappear.
well, something like that. Or like, because that moment where they leave each other, I thought was beautiful. I thought, how she turned around.
I know. And you just hear his voice, like, I'll always love you, Diana, after he's already out of the shot. I was like, stop!
Right. And I thought it was like a 1-2 punch because it's like, oh, she just lost that. And then she has to deal with Barbara. And now she has to deal with, Maxwell Lord. But it was one of those things where it's like the stakes built really quickly at the end and didn't give you enough time to really feel for them. And I felt like if they would have maybe shifted that, Steve Trevor one towards the end, it would have been more of like, oh my God, like all this stuff is happening, but I really only care about her.
Well, and it's also an example of like what I think we've sort of talked about. One, they were trying to do too much, I think, in some sense. And also I think it's a problem with the writing because I think one thing that is absolutely, you're right, is that like they produce a tremendous amount of emotional energy and then they do very little with it, with that part. So in other words, she leaves, it reminds me of the Black Mercy, where when Mongol says to Superman, it must, because he has to leave his greatest paradise behind, it must have been like ripping your own arm off.
Right.
So Diana has to be this great hero, has to leave, she has to
the only thing she's ever wanted.
And she starts running and I am so fucking with her. And I'm not saying she had to be like a maniac, but like, the whole point, I was like, oh, she's fucking pissed and for good reason. And then when the next scene, she's got the armor on, like she goes to like, and then
confront
fights Cheetah. And then she's very sterile again and very like stoic, which I understand they want her to be, but like it was, I think, a bit abrupt. I think we needed her to like have an energy going into it.
Can I just point out, like, she shouldn't have had the armor.
Agreed.
At all. She got her powers back. She didn't need it. Mm-hmm. And I felt like it was so underutilized that it just made the fight with Cheetah a little less it just wasn't as good as it could have been.
Yeah,
and like the whole armor.
Because it was like more defensive and it was like Cheetah was punching these feathers, which again is like cool, but that's not the brawler Diana fighting style we want.
When I saw it in the trailer, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I loved this in the comics. Cool. And then when I saw how it was actually used, I was like, oh.
There also wasn't any symbolic reason she should be wearing it. Because you would think it would be connected to the story. Like, yeah, it just...
But it was ad hoc because they write it in there. She's like, it was this great hero that was like sacrificed
withstood all of
but I agree.
It's whatever.
But again, and I think this happens, and it's a bit of a writing sin, and it happens a lot. And the thing is that like they have this thing that they want to do, this moment they want to be in it, and so they have to put it in there and then give some ad hoc explanation. So a good example is sort of like that. Like they want this visual. Because they have this whole aesthetic, it is beautiful, but yeah, from a story perspective, it doesn't really need to be in there.
Yeah. Maxwell Lord, Pedro Pascal's last scene, I thought, the whole bunker scene, I thought was great. That really, throughout the whole movie, he's showing this weird, so he's super eccentric, he's a salesman, he's, he's a little shady and stuff, and then he really goes off the deep end, and when he looks sick, it's super believable. I was waiting for that nosebleed, that iconic Maxwell Lord nosebleed.
Yeah.
Got that, and then the last scene, I was like, oh. And it really played, because he had a son. They wrote his son for him to give up all of this stuff that he wanted. And I thought it was smart, because Diana gave up everything she wanted. Barbara did. Maxwell Lord did. So it was everybody had to sacrifice something.
Yeah.
Max is kind of a hero in a weird way.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, that's what Diana told. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't the villain. The villain was the stone. The
That's
villain
right.
was that god that it was with. He was just the
should have
antagonist.
just said Ertz Cartaga.
I have a theory. So at the end, whenever we give our final thoughts, I have a theory about Cheetah and stuff in the future. But I did want to say, did you guys catch that Etta Candy cameo?
Yes,
Yeah.
I posted it.
Yeah, you posted it.
I was so sad.
I wanted to add to your point about his nosebleed. The real dynamic duo in all of this is the combination of Patty Jenkins and Pedro Pascal. His head is down. He looks up. Then you see the nosebleed and you see that look, and it is fucking genius.
Yeah.
I just, before we leave him, I just have to say, to me, this, he's chewing the scenery the whole time in the way that we love, but it's sort of like, you're like, oh, nobody talks like that, but he's this television lying personality. So that is what he would be like.
Yep.
Yeah. He is this sleazy car salesman that you're like, I don't want you near me, but I have to watch you.
Yeah.
You know?
And you have so many modes that he does because he's doing the, I love my kid. You absolutely believe it. You have his outward personality. Like, so what is the thing he says? Like,
oh yeah, when he points.
Yeah, and then does
but it could be better.
It could be better. You have that. It's a believable form of fakeness.
Yeah.
And then you have this big moment where he's like, "I've infinite power," and it's he's not going to get the Oscar that he very well would deserve. But I think it's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say, like, everybody in this movie, the roles they were given, regardless if we like the writing or the decisions,
they were like, I'm going to rock
Crush
this. This is going to be an Emmy-worthy performance.
That's why I'm just kind of sad that it's like, oh, he probably is never going to be in this again.
Yeah,
it's like, because he was so good.
I honestly do believe you could have him. I think that it's like, you could do he activated his meta abilities that he just kept a certain level of influence. And then the other thing is Max was in the comics for a long time before he had powers.
Yeah, but you also have to realize that this is in 84 and they're well into their late 30s. So if they went current, then they would be a little...
You got me there.
His character arc is done. He chose his son.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
So, okay, so this is going to bring us to them. We'll just wrap up, everything. So where do you place this in relative to the first Wonder Woman film?
I like the first one better.
Me too.
I feel like it had bigger moments that resonated more with me.
No Man's Land.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, how can you top No Man's Land, right?
I was waiting for it, and they just didn't. I think, like, when she left Steve Trevor, that was one of the ones where I was like,
her running away, and that's why I'm saying when she was like starting to run away from him, and you just hear his voice going like, "I'll always love you, Dan." I was like, "Oh no."
Why?
Yeah, that was pretty. Again, like, I didn't tear up in the first one. I teared up in this one. So there's that. But yeah, I feel like the first Wonder Woman is a better standalone. I like it a little bit better in terms of music, just overall. But
it's hard to beat that first one. The first one is maybe my third favorite. It's arbitrary, but like superhero movie. One, because I actually think that the fact that the third act is bad is just exaggerated. I think that's true, but it's not. I don't even think it's bad.
I just have an opinion on Ares should have looked better, but other than that, that's it.
Like, why did he still have the mustache?
Yeah.
I mean, Ares can have a mustache,
yeah.
But I think like the third act is forgivable only because the first and second were so good that it's like, get away from it.
There's she's just inspirational and they nail it so hard. And like I've always been kind of a Wonder Woman fan, and if you're a comic fan, and usually you sort of this shit out, and it just made me. It put her in my top 10. Yeah. Like, I've always kind of like Wonder Woman. That I was like, I get it. Okay, so this just is gonna fall short of that.
Yeah.
I have to say, I'm glad that we did this episode. We were going to do it automatically, but putting our heads together with this, like, it made me see things about this movie that I didn't know that I really appreciated, especially from a writing standpoint, because I still think it has a lot of these flaws. But we've worked out some stuff. I mean, both of you have pointed out things where I'm like, no, this was actually a really smart writing move. So in certain ways, I think that there's really good stuff about this. I still think it falls below, but
yeah.
I mean, I don't know if this is a cop-out or not, but I like them both equally.
Oh, really?
That's still strong. That's a strong thing to say.
Yeah, it is.
I think I would, like, the first Wonder Woman would barely make it, only because I would watch that one more.
Yeah.
I don't know how much more I would watch this one, but if I wanted to watch a superhero movie, and if I was to think of, like, okay, I want to have a marathon, both of them would make it in it, as opposed to some of the other ones. Like Batman versus Superman would not make it in it. Only the scene with she's introduced would. So it's like, so it just barely edges out. But I like them both almost equally, which I think it's weird for me to say because, like, there's so much weirdness with this one. I think with the first movie, everybody loved it. And this one, I'm just like, but I love this one. Why don't you love this one? Like, it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's an interesting feeling. So as far as, like, we're just going to broaden the scope a little bit. How would you, like, place this relative to other DC movies? and also just comic book movies in general. So just to widen the scope of it. So if you had to rank it or put it in percentile.
Oof.
I know, tough question. I'm sorry.
I know. I guess it would be like my fourth in terms of DC. Because I like the first Wonder Woman better. I like Shazam is my favorite DC movie. And I like Aquaman a little bit more, only because of the implications for the sequel. So if I was just thinking of these movies standalone, I think this movie and Aquaman have equal parts cheese and things I liked and didn't like, that they would be even. But because they killed Cheetah, not really, but they killed that character, and Max Lord at the end, and the implication that Steve Trevor probably can't come back, I feel like I'm more excited for an Aquaman sequel. So that probably edges it out a little bit. So it'd probably be my fourth favorite DC movie.
DC movies really hurt my heart in a weird way because, like, the thing is, like, I feel with Marvel movies, their problem is safeness and averageness.
Yeah.
Not all of them are like that, but, like, I think Marvel has this unfair advantage because, like, they'll be really chicken shit, but because nobody hates it, because they don't fuck anything up. People are like, oh,
and because it's part of, like, a larger scheme,
Oh, yeah.
You get like 7 superheroes in one superhero movie. Yeah. It's like, yeah, of course people are going to like it.
Which is smart. So it's not like it's an accident. They did a good job on that. But I'm just saying, but with DC movies, it'll be like, there'll be things I love and also things that annoy the shit out of me. I have to say, this is going to sound weird. I like this better than Aquaman. Oh. And I think the main and I actually love Aquaman as a character. And it's not like, I'm so protective. I actually... we talked about this. I don't love the acting in Aquaman.
I think that it does fall short. It's beautiful, but
of Aquaman, really, or of Mira. I could do that whole episode again and have the same opinion.
At their hearts, these are character-driven movies more than anything. Usually, the stories aren't even particularly like, the plotting's not amazing or whatever. So if I don't believe the actors, if I'm not really invested in their performance, it's really hard to be like, into it. So this, I put this just above Aquaman, I think.
I just want to see more Orm. So Aquaman is equal because I'm like, bring him back.
He probably will
and that's
be.
what I'm saying. Like I'll end up not liking something, and then I love how that movie looks. I love the visuals. I love the action. And not just like its look, like the way that they pace it. And in this movie, it's like, I don't like a lot of the choices they made. Like, I think, like we mentioned, the cheetah fight wasn't as good as it could have been, but the acting is so goddamn good. So, yeah.
I think it's pretty obvious where this places. It's like, if I had to pick my top 5 favorite DC movies, it would definitely make it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would probably be Shazam, Wonder Woman 1, Wonder Woman 2, Aquaman. And then...
I love that we basically have the same top movies for DC.
I think the thing that, like, with the difference between Marvel and DC, especially now, ever since they kind of went away from Snyder and we're getting these other, superheroes and other directors in here, is that DC really is trying to do different things. They're really branching out. They're trying to do stories that really amplify the character and not trying to do the same tone and everything with their movies. I'm not saying Marvel doesn't do that, but Marvel does have a very formulaic way of doing their movies.
So it'll be consistently at least okay. Some of them are great, some of them are average, but you never hate them. With DC, it's like they're experimental. So you either like, you executed this so well, or you're like, Jesus Christ, that was
right.
garbage.
And I think that's the thing that, like, I'm having as a fan, as a huge Wonder Woman fan with this, and the thing that hurts my heart when people are saying, like, this movie sucks, and they don't like it because they were expecting more fight scenes or warrior Wonder Woman. It's like, well, but this is Wonder Woman. This is her character. Like, you gotta let her, you saw what she could do. You gotta see a different side of her. And now we have this bigger, robust character than we had from the first one. So it just makes me appreciate the character more. She
also did it enough. I mean, like, I could have used more too, but like, as a criticism, it's just not that serious to me because, like, she kicked a bunch of ass. She smashed a bunch of stuff. She's strong as fuck. Like, whatever.
Yeah. So it definitely, it ranks high with mine. So, what was your guys' favorite part? You have to pick one scene.
Oh, I can't.
What was your favorite part about it?
Beginning. I have to say, it's like, and that's the other thing.
Little Diana.
Wait, which beginning? Which beginning?
Oh, no. See, that's a good point. I mean, the Amazon scene, and that's I think also fucked up. I think people need to watch it again. And the reason I say that is that like I was a little disappointed in the movie. I think the first watch a little bit because that first scene is so goddamn good.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't do this forever, but Patty Jenkins understands how to do the Amazon so well, and it's Zack Snyder's were so awful that seeing her do it and then him in the middle and then her, I was like, oh, thank God. The women are strong, but they don't feel like fetishized. They have like real personalities.
And they're not just masculine women. You know?
Absolutely.
Right. They're women that are badasses.
Yeah.
It's not that hard.
That masculine women, like there's anything wrong with that or they shouldn't be included. But you're right. It doesn't look like like a strong woman for Zack Snyder is a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
In a bikini.
Yeah.
Absolutely. This was, but also it's just like the action was cool as shit too. Like
I love that you got to see little Diana again.
Yeah, it was great.
My favorite scene would probably be the second opening. And mostly the mall. And mostly because it's like, that has been in her origin, like a mall situation, super cool. But mostly because you get those moments and people, feminist moments or whatever, but throughout the movie, there's these girls that are looking up to her and like showing that she is inspiring people. She inspires little girls that like, oh, I can do this too. Or it's just like those little moments where I'm like, we all do that with superheroes. That's why we read comics in the first place.
I love when that one robber is dangling that girl over the edge, and the other robbers are like, "What are you doing?" Even his allies are like, "No, dude, what are you doing?"
I think that was like that's another point to that scene. It was like cheesy because like when they were running up the wrong escalator, I was like, "What are you doing?" Like they have no idea what they're doing here, but it fits so well with what was happening. Yeah. And then she busts through the glass ceiling and gets in there when you first see her.
I didn't even notice that. That's good.
And she was like, we're not going to do this today. I was like, Wonder Woman is back.
I love that line delivery. I was just like,
Yep. The tiara. Okay, that was the last thing.
She used it like Sailor Moon. My favorite is a tie between, I've already brought up both of them. The scene when she actually has to say goodbye to Steve. I just feel like it really carried a lot of emotional weight.
You felt like that's what the movie was building to. Like you knew it was going to happen.
That part was executed so well. And it's going to stay with me forever. Even more than the first goodbye scene at the end of the first Wonder Woman movie. I feel like this one was stronger, just more emotional for me. But also the conversation that they had in the invisible jet, that whole takeoff in the invisible jet, and then they were driving through the fireworks and all that stuff. I like that part.
It was really pretty.
So, look, I just, by the way, it just reminded me, Wonder Woman saves people. That happens so seldom in comic book movies. It's insane.
Yeah, she does.
No, but I mean, like they make a point to show her, like, and they've learned this lesson. Like Aquaman's like hits that bell thing. It so rarely happens. Marvel characters they do it because they fight bad guys. But like, there's one scene in in Avengers 2 where Thor flies down and grabs the car. And I don't know why he puts it back on the island that's going to die instead of down to the ground. But either way, the point is it was
shorter.
Yeah, exactly. Shorter. The point is he tried to save them. And I was like, why doesn't this happen more?
Yeah. I just feel, I mean, depending on what the movie is they usually try to do a bigger scale. And it's like, it's just the villain and not about the people. Like Marvel did have big implications with not saving people.
Yeah.
But I feel like DC has really learned their lesson, and I don't know because it was Man of Steel.
It totally is. Yeah.
Yeah. But it is cool to see it. It's like, you have to show that.
This guy, Cosmonaut Variety Hour, pointed this out. It wasn't me, but it's such a good point that, like, in the first movie, Diana sees that people are in trouble, doesn't even think about it, and runs through like as an instinct to save people. It is the most. This is why I love that movie. It is just one of the most spot on essences of what a superhero is supposed to be. They get it exactly right.
Yeah, they risk themselves to save the people. That's just like when she lets go of the lasso during the tank scene to save the girls. She's just like, I'm going to take the hit. Like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to save these two girls.
You know why she does that, Kayla? Because that's what heroes do.
Okay, so second to last question. Last question should be relatively easy. This last one. What do you hope for the next Wonder Woman movie? Because as of yesterday, Wonder Woman 3 is officially
in production. Yeah,
production development starting. So we know there's going to be a third one. So what do you hope? Aside from Steve Trevor.
Aside from Steve?
Because that's probably not going to happen until Flashpoint anyway. So
I got two for you.
Okay.
Kayla, do you want to go first? I don't want to skip you.
Just, the fight scene stuff is a legit shit argument for why this movie is bad, quote unquote. I do want to see more graceful floating Diana akin to first movie action fighty scenes. So
they just need to merge the heart
maybe
and the
just
badass.
bring her back to the ground. Flying is cool. I understand the connection to Steve Trevor, but I want her to be less lasso and more punch you in the face.
Right. I agree.
Other than that, I liked everything. So keep up the acting, guys.
I got a pitch for you. It would be nice, like I said, to have a return of Cheetah, so we get to see that. I think there's plenty of ways to write it. So, but here's the thing: I want Cersei, and I want the Bana Migdal. Because I would love to see some. So, for the listener, the Bana Migdal, sort of the Amazons that like embrace Ares and war, and they're kind of like they broke off from the regular Amazons, so
they're like opposite
that would
Amazons.
have been cool. Yeah, that would be cool.
Be awesome to see Wonder Woman fight some people that wouldn't be as strong but could fight like she does.
It would also be a nice redemption for Ares' character.
Absolutely.
Like bringing him back in a way that everyone likes.
And like I said, Cersei being like maybe the one that like is responsible for bringing them back. She can be our like higher up villain that has magic and shit like that. But Diana like does a lot of sword fighting and like ass kicking and stuff like that. That's my name.
It would be so the Cersei thing is probably my top pick. I have bring Cersei into it. She could bring Cheetah in somehow because Cersei really makes like animal beast hybrids.
Kate Blanchett.
No, she was already Hela.
That's why it would be perfect.
I want to see Loki in the new Wonder Woman movie. Let's bring in some Norse guys.
Yeah.
So I would love to see her in it. I just finished. I was catching up on Justice League Dark, and I just read the second volume, and it's heavily with Cersei. She's super contemporary now. She's like a butch Scottish lesbian, but it works so well.
Tilda Swinton.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
I actually would want it just to be an Amazon story.
Sure.
Because I feel like depending on what they're thinking about doing, like if they made a more modern one, I just think like it's going to be weird with people being like, when was Justice League happening? Why isn't it doing this? But I feel like one of everybody's favorite moments from even this one is the Amazons.
Yeah.
And if they just went back to it and had like even the Medusa storyline there, or they had some big, large scale, it would be amazing.
I like this. I changed my answer to, instead of the emotional weight, you know how much I love Steve Trevor, but instead of the emotional weight of the movie going with Steve, maybe have some drama with Hippolyta, because that is woven throughout Wonder Woman comics. So having the emotional weight with her mother, I think, would be a very interesting plot for the third one.
And the gods.
Yeah, she hasn't gone back to Themyscira, and that happens in the comics. I know there have been some retcons and stuff like that, but the point is that it would be cool if, like, because she's supposed to save man's world, and that, like, she, for whatever reason, like, she has to go back to Themyscira. And then it'd be badass. You could still have some, like, Earths begin in Earth or whatever, but...
That might also bring in Barbara. I mean, what if they do the Earth's Cartaga thing, because Barbara and Rebirth, they met up because they were trying to find Themyscira.
Let's just do a treatment, you guys.
All of this. Let's us write this new movie.
Yeah. I think it'd be cool.
Okay. So out of 10, what do you rate this movie?
7.75.
That's very specific. I have to admit, I'm going to say this, and this is why doing this podcast and this specific stuff is so good, is that I would have said 5 at the beginning of the episode, but now after talking about it, thinking about it, fleshing it out, and let's face it, you start to love things that you analyze a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it's a strong 7. I'm going to say strong 7.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm going to go 8.5.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, that to me, honestly, even though I don't go that high, that is not really out of the realm of reasonableness to me. So yeah, it's good.
It had everything that I would want in a Wonder Woman story. I didn't expect it to be like Batman or Superman. I don't want it to be. So the fact it was so different from that, it checked all my boxes. There was weird moments and Cheetah was but everything was
If you
great
didn't
with
like it, listener, watch it again. I really think it's better the second time.
Listen to our episode, watch it again, and change your mind.
And I don't, not necessarily final thought, but at least I want to say this, and watch it again and go ahead and donate to our Patreon.
Because we forgot to plug it at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yes. We are so much sillier and hilarious on our Patreon than we are in our regular episodes, and we're already hilarious.
You'll support the show, and I'd like to thank the comic industry generally.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how, but
that was such an odd plug.
I
know. I did a poll on Instagram of like, did you like it? Thumbs up or thumbs down? I just want to say that out of like I think it was 110 people that voted, 87% of people liked it.
That's good.
So
our followers are good people, so join the Legion.
Don't just listen to Twitter. I mean, people have Twitter accounts that like to start arguments or spread false stuff. Don't just listen to them. Don't look at Rotten Tomatoes.
I feel attacked. No, I'm just saying.
Go with what you like.
Yeah.
And I feel like, and we're going to be boosting this movie even more just because it's getting unreasonable
hate. If you look at
so.
Rotten Tomatoes, by the way, the critics thing is lower than, and it's not
than
really
the audience.
The audience. That means that it's not fake.
Yeah.
Because they always want to pretend that it's like, it's the liberal critics are like blowing it up, but the real audience. But in this case, most of the people that saw it liked it.
Mm-hmm.
It was like almost at like 80% for audience score, which is decent when the critic score is like in the low 60s now. Ugh, whatever. I feel like there's like a bandwagon thing happening, and it's just really annoying.
Enjoy Wonder Woman.
Yeah, let us know what you thought about it, and talk to us. Go to our Discord. We have a Discord. You can talk to us directly on there if you have a problem with whatever one of us said. Bring it to us.
Prepare to fight.
If you wonder why we're so positive, it's because we like shit here, and when we don't,
we like comic
and when we
books.
Don't like them, we make better ones ourselves.
or what we like to do is try to find the good thing in the shit. Right. But Happy New Year, guys. Well, bye. How do I stop this? There we go.
Thanks for listening. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at The Phantom Zone Pod for more podcast updates.